Chapter 17. Behind the Veil. Ferry headed towards Matilda's house, thinking that seeing his best friend might take his mind away from the apparition of the night before. They were to pick up Ben and spend the whole day together. But his legs didn't seem to listen. He quickened his pace and passed by Matilda's house. It was as if something was pushing him from behind. After he left behind the last house in town, he was running already. Soon, he reached the tapestry of trees at the foot of the northern hills. When he crossed on the other side, the veiled lady's bright garden greeted him with a gentle wind gust. No trace of the lady of the house, as usual. Ferry went round the cottage to the back door, and quietly went in. This time, the room was somehow lit by the morning light which penetrated the old, cracked window shutters. It was quiet. Only the old mahogany clock ticked above the fireplace. Ferry could now observe the place at will. The house was an inside garden. Morning glory and ivy covered the walls from top to bottom. He carefully walked so as not to move anything, feeling his feet sink in the moss carpet covering the room's floor. In the middle of the room, he discovered the oak table where Lavender Sky had left the feathers for him. 4 chairs surrounded the table, a colorful pillow on each one. Ferry touched it with his gloved hand. The table had engravings on it. Scratches, better yet. On a closer look, he saw there were children's drawings, unicorns, fantastic birds, and beasts he'd never seen before. He studied the drawings more carefully. To his surprise, he noticed a raven man among them. He took a step back, in amazement at his discovery, when he bumped into something. Or someone. He slowly turned, his heart drumming in his ears. He discovered a still silhouette behind him. Someone with a funny hat, decorated with magical feathers, and a grey, long hair falling to the floor. He stepped away from the silhouette, his heart racing. But the silhouette didn't move, and Ferry realized it wasn't the old lady at all. It was a mannequin, like the ones he saw in Mr. Button's tailor shop. Things couldn't get any weirder. A wooden cupboard covered an entire wall, the shelves full of boxes, cups and mugs, plates and saucers, and teapots. No trace of dust, a sign that someone took great care of the house. But the porcelain objects were not the ones to capture his attention. Nor the fire burning in the fireplace, scattering warmth and a sweet fir tree scent. Not even the tin cauldron, hung on a hook over the fire, where a celery soup was bubbling. On the shelf above the fireplace, there were old photos of a man, yellowed by time, in silver frames decorated with flower motifs. At first, he looked young, with powerful arms and glistening eyes. Then older, sadder, his eyes empty. His smile, frozen on his lips. Yet it was not the man in the photos that intrigued him. It was the silhouette appearing in every photo beside the man, a being of light, with blurry, dim facial features. Only the long hair was hard not to be noticed, falling all the way to the ground, as bright as light. Another 2 beings of light, smaller this time, were appearing in the following pictures. In the last one, the man was gone. Only the 3 beings of light. "You can take off your gloves," he heard a gentle voice behind him, the same as the other time. "There is no iron in this house." Ferry winced and slowly turned. The veiled lady was there, hidden in a dark corner of the room. For a second, he thought about running. But something made him stay, he couldn't move. "Please don't be afraid," the voice continued. "I know you may ask yourself why I brought you here." Ferry thought about saying something. Anything. "I'm sorry I broke into your house that night," he muttered. The veiled lady laughed, a burst of gentle laughter which made the air around vibrate. "You came to me that night because I wanted you to come. Someone like you should know that." "Someone like me?" Ferry wondered. "Yes, someone like you. I'm sure you know by now how different you are. That you're seeing things other people can't." The veiled lady took a step closer, but remained in the shadows. "What I'm going to tell you is going to trouble you. I don't expect you to believe me. You see, you are not an ordinary boy. Actually, you're not a boy at all. Not a human boy, that is, the gentle voice continued. You're a fairy. In fact, I believe that's what you were trying to tell everyone who called you by your human name. They just misunderstood it. But Ferry is not your real name either. I know it's not my real name, Ferry dared to say. My real name is Andrew Donovan. But the veiled lady continued, untroubled. That is your name as a human. But not your fairy name. Ferry felt a weakness in his legs. He slowly sat in the armchair in front of the fire. How do you know that? He whispered. Well, when you came into this world, there were signs. I felt it. You felt when I was born? Asked Ferry. No, not when you were born. For you were not born here. You were switched. You took the place of the Donovan child. What do you mean switched? Ferry wondered even more. You're a changeling, Ferry. A fairy child who took the place of a human child. And your parents are not actually your parents. But if I'm a fairy, why can't I fly? Why don't I have wings? I thought only girls could be fairies. I can't even spread pixie dust. Lavender Sky giggled. Fairies are both girls and boys. Just like humans. As for the wings, fairies don't have wings. People imagined them with wings because they could fly. That's why in every fairy tale book you'll see fairies with insect wings. But can you imagine such fragile wings having to lift those fairy bodies in the air? It's ridiculous. As for you flying, you will fly when the time shall come. You see, you've been among humans for so long, you're more of a human than a fairy. And the more you live in the world of humans, the more your fairy powers will weaken. Because there are dangers for a fairy living in humans' world. I'm sure you know by now that iron can hurt you. I'm sure you know your blood is different. It's white, not red like human blood. You've probably noticed how pale your skin is. How sweet, your voice, or that you are the fastest runner or the biggest tree climber. Haven't you ever wondered why? Ferry nodded, blinking slowly. The veiled lady continued. But there are other things only you can see. And that is not only your imagination, as Eileen Donovan would like you to believe. She doesn't know you're not her real child, although she sees how different you are. Because that's how humans are. They find it hard to accept what is different and strange. The things they cannot understand. Then she turned quiet. The air in the room was soft and warm, making Ferry feel dizzy. And for a second, Ferry thought he was dreaming. But then a log in the fire cracked, scattering small sparks. And Ferry was wide awake again. He rose from the warm armchair. I have to go, he said. My mum is waiting for me. It was nice talking to you, he added, slowly moving towards the door. Your stories are very interesting. Wait, the voice demanded. It was firm this time, and Ferry had the feeling the woman was now closer, which made him feel uncomfortable. There are many other things you should know. Ferry was barely breathing, his heart drumming in his ears. No. I really have to go. And how come you know all those things about me? Have you been following me? He almost shouted. Strangely enough, outside it was dark already, and Ferry headed towards the door at a firm pace. But the door closed by itself with a loud noise right in front of him. Ferry shuddered. From somewhere above him, a petal fell. Slowly, as if in a dream. A silver petal, like those that were usually accompanying the veiled lady. He turned slowly. Now he was frightened. Because I'm a fairy too, he could hear her voice close. And he watched how a whirlwind of silver flowers exploded in thousands of petals of light. While from the middle of them emerged the most beautiful creature he'd ever seen. The being had long, silver hair which fell all the way to the ground, and a pale, almost luminescent face. Her eyes studied him, scattering icy blue sparks with every flutter of her long white eyelashes. She was wearing the same dress of a dark purple color, rustling as she came closer. When she was close enough, She put a delicate hand on his shoulder and said to Ferry in a velvety voice, "Come. We have a lot to talk about." Ferry obeyed, unable to fight back. Was he under her spell? The fairy, for he wouldn't know to name her otherwise, showed him a chair at the table. He took a seat without saying a word. She put on the table 2 porcelain bowls with soup from the bubbling cauldron and silver tableware. The frail steam coming from the soup sent the most inviting flavors of celery and onion. "Eat, you must be hungry," she gently said. The room wasn't dark anymore. It was softly lit by the shimmering, flickering light of dozens of candles decorating the walls with trembling shadows, as in a sacred temple. He took a sip. An explosion of flavors, some of them familiar, others strange, yet delicious, blended in a taste he could not describe. Ferry took a spoonful from the inviting liquor, the color of honey, without minding whether the soup was enchanted. He looked up at Lavender a bit fearfully, but the fear vanished when the fairy smiled at him. She took a seat on the other side of the table, sipping from her spoon without making a noise. "It's been so long since I had a guest," she said. "I almost forgot what it's like to have someone invited to dinner. It feels nice." She then chuckled at his appetite. "It's a recipe I've learned from an old fairy from my land. It must be thousands of years old." "That was so long ago," she said with a sigh. "It's made of parsnip, carrot, celery, and parsley roots, and other vegetables and herbs you won't find in this world. I've saved some seeds, then planted them here, in this garden." Ferry thought it would be appropriate to say something polite. After all, that was how his mother had taught him. "I've seen your garden. It's the most beautiful I've ever seen." "It is, isn't it? I've tried to keep it the way it was when he was still alive," she said, and clouds descended in her eyes. "But with each day, I feel it's losing the beauty it once had. Time is ruthless, you know? It steals from you. Sometimes, I realize I don't even remember his face. I know he had dark hair and green eyes, and his skin was touched by the sun. But I can't remember his face. Time is trying to take that away from me. Yet it can't take away how I feel. Nobody can," and a teardrop fell from her beautiful eyes, scattering in tiny drops of light when it touched the table's surface. Ferry didn't quite understand what the fairy was talking about. He thought he should change the subject. "How long have you been living among humans?" he softly asked. "Too long," she said with a bitter smile, wiping the tears away. "In the time of humans, more than 100 years. It is an awfully long time, even for a fairy. How did you get here? And why haven't you returned to your land?" Ferry wondered. "Why?" she said whilst her eyes got lost in distant times and memories. "Why do we do the most courageous acts? The most amazing things, yet the maddest and stupidest ones? Because of love." Lavender Sky stood up from her chair and went to the shelf above the fireplace. "My story," she began, "is quite amazing, even for a fairy. I'm not from around here. I came from a distant land, as far away as you can imagine. I used the doors between worlds to travel to far-off places. These doors were always guarded, and the fairy leaders only opened them at special times or when it was necessary. But I always found a way to sneak through. You see, opening those doors can be dangerous. Dark forces can slip through if you're not careful. But my curiosity always got the best of me. I was fascinated by everything, especially humans. I loved to watch them from above, safely hidden by my fairy invisibility. I never interacted with them because it was forbidden. The Book of Fairies, from ancient times when the great fairies still walked the land, strictly forbade it. And those who broke the rules faced severe punishment. The fairy laws are harsh, harsher than what humans call death. But I was a bit reckless. Even though I followed the rules, I loved watching humans, listening to their voices, observing their daily lives. I also enjoyed playing tricks on them, like hiding their hats, making their food disappear, and moving their tools. People are incredible. They can be kind and generous, but also foolish, fierce, and cruel. I've met all kinds. But one person stood out above all the rest, she said softly. It was a beautiful summer day, blessed by the sun and the wind. I slipped through the door between worlds, tricking the guards as I always did. The guards are terrifying, ruthless creatures, but not very smart. I would distract them with honey and sneak by while they fought over the sweet bait. That day, the sun was especially bright, and I wanted to find some shade. So I headed to the shepherd forest. I knew other sorts of fairies lived there. There are over 300 breeds in our world. But I wasn't interested in them. I just wanted to find a shady spot. As I descended, searching for a spring or a puddle to quench my thirst, I didn't notice the iron trap hidden under the leaves and branches. It was meant for wild animals, but it caught my foot, nearly crushing my ankle. I started to bleed. Fairy blood, white and shimmering. As I was lying there, I feared the worst. I thought I would be torn apart by wild beasts or, even worse, captured by humans. I was afraid they might kill me out of fear or ignorance, or worse, parade me around like a circus animal, showing off something they didn't understand. Then I heard twigs snapping under heavy footsteps, coming closer. Someone set my foot free from the iron trap. But I was too weak to fly. Strong arms lifted me up as if I were weightless and carried me away. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel his heart beating hard against my chest. He smelled like soil after a warm summer rain, like dust and freshly cut grass. He held me close, and I couldn't see where we were going. But strangely, I wasn't afraid anymore. I felt safer than I had ever felt, even in my own world. I looked up and saw the sky above us, with clouds drifting along as if they were following us. That moment, I needed nothing more than his arms around me, and the gentle blessing of the lavender sky above.